Welcome back to another edition of the Bring the Juice podcast. I'm your co-host, Cody Felger. Alongside me, Derek Larger as usual, and we have a special guest, actually two special guests from the Heavyweights podcast. We have Nick Klein and Dustin Urban. Guys, how you doing?
Doing really good.
Doing great, man.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that we could do this. I know it's kind of been a lot of for us trying to get our schedules to align and everything else, so I'm glad we could do it. Before we kind of dive into this podcast a little bit and kind of dive into what we wanted to talk about today, Derek, I think you kind of wanted to talk about something that's kind of a little more urgent than what we're talking about, that being the coronavirus and how that could potentially, impact, it's already impacted basketball and a lot of other different things, but, how that could potentially impact the NFL going forward. Take it away, Derek.
Yeah, it's kind of weird just sitting back kind of knowing that the NFL is really the only league right now in the world right now that's not really being directly affected by the coronavirus at this moment in time, just because, it's obviously been off season for a couple months, and obviously that the season won't start until July, which most people assume that, with the rate this is going, with the way what the United States is trying to do now, most people assume that, the outbreak will kind of slow down here in the next couple months, which we're really hoping that's the case. Obviously we saw some pro days obviously have been canceled. Teams are restricting travel for some of their scouts, which obviously is unfortunate for guys that are trying to get more insight on some day 2, day 3 guys. And then there's rumors about, the NFL draft, what's going to happen there. Are they going to actually just get rid of it altogether? Are they just going to do like a broadcast where, the commissioner just does it one thing at a time, just not having the players there? I honestly have no idea at this point, but Nick, Dustin, we'll start with you on this one, and then Cody, you can give your opinions on it afterwards. What do you guys expect? What do you expect for the NFL to do going forward? Obviously, the draft and free agency, NFL's already stated nothing's going to change for free agency. We just don't know about the draft, and obviously it's still another half a year until the season actually starts. So do you think that this coronavirus has the potential to move things back, or do you think that this might just blow over before we really get into major NFL territory?
Well, the biggest thing with the coronavirus for all this is I don't think it's going to do much for free agency, because you can do conference calls, do Skype, everything like that, and get all your contracts out of the way and stuff like that. But with the draft, it could really hurt. I mean, the coverage of it, like you said, it'll probably just end up being the commissioner. Each team will call their pick in, and he'll say the name. But that's a big event for the league, and they make a lot of money off that, especially with it being in Las Vegas this year. It was supposed to be a big spectacle. So I really think that could hurt them a lot.
I don't think that the draft would be that much of a factor. We can go back to the days when Paul Tagliabue was the commissioner. I mean, the draft, we watched it on TV, all of us growing up. It wasn't this big event that it's been for the last few years. My biggest concern is if this keeps going and we're getting into after the draft and we're going into May and we're still seeing the MLB shut down, the NBA shut down, what's this going to do for rookie minicamp and OTAs?
Yeah.
Are you going to have to push everything back? And then you have all these undrafted players that sign with their respective team, and they go to the rookie minicamp where they have the camp invites. And then are you going to have to push that back and then just go on hope and whim and try to cram everything into training camp, which means you start off with, instead of 90 players, you start off with 100, 105. That would be my biggest concern right now with this. But I'm still hoping that within a month, everything's back to normal. We're still playing, and it won't even affect the NFL at all, like you've already seen it with every other major sport right now.
Yeah, Cody, what about you?
I mean, you brought up a good point there, Nick. Like, I guess I didn't think about, man, if it lingers, if this is a thing that goes into OTAs, minicamp, heck, if it goes into training camp, like that's obviously huge for not just rookies, but also for, guys in free agency. They want to learn an entire new offense or an entire new defense. It's huge. It's crazy to think about that. And hopefully this thing just blows over. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, it would be almost similar to when we had the lockout in 2011. You saw a lot of guys not going in, But this would be almost different in the fact of everybody's going to still try to work out on their own, but you have all these new faces in your team and you're trying to get organized. It's just, to me, they would have to compensate for this and then just bring stuff back in later. Or like I said, opening up the training camp size to get more guys in, to get more looks. Because I don't expect this to keep going into July or August, but it has a potential to go into the end of April and May, and that's when it's really going to affect the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, Zach Hicks, who's obviously a Colts fan, a lot of us recognize him on Twitter. He said multiple times over this week, saying how, you know, with what the coronavirus is now doing with all these travel bans and everything that's going on with travel, a lot of these guys who are, you know, having their pro days scheduled here in the next week or two, you know, these guys who aren't the Jalen Hurts or the CD Lambs or, you know, the big names like Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa, the guys that we know are going to be first round, possibly second round guys. We're talking about guys who are, you know, going to be late round guys that rely on these pro days to kind of remind people like they got things that they can do. Now they can't show that in front of scouts, and now that could hurt their futures in the long run. You could see some of these guys not get drafted the way that they normally would. I mean, I said it on Twitter earlier that I said that the outbreak of this is not going to be the physical damage that it does. It's everything else on top of that that's going on with the markets and people's jobs and money that's not being dispersed around right now. That's going to be a bigger issue in few months than what the infection rate is, honestly, in my opinion. But like, yeah, it is getting to be a little, it is going to be a little concerning for some of those guys that are relying on these pro days and other scouting events for their futures, and they're not going to be able to do it because of this exact reason. So,
yeah, I mean,
so we got that one. Cody, did you want to move into free agency then?
Yeah, before I did that, actually, I just thought, you know, most of our listeners, maybe they listen to your podcast, maybe not, but I'm kind of curious for you guys. Tell us a little bit about your podcast. You know, how did you guys get started in the whole podcasting sports talk world? How long have you been doing it? How did you guys meet? All that stuff. We want to hear a little bit about you guys.
Yeah, so me and Dustin grew up together. I was a few years ahead of him. We went to high school together. I went to Indiana University. Sports broadcasting was my major. And so I covered for a website called Cover 32 for a while. I was the draft analyst and the AFC South analyst. So I wrote for that for a while. I kind of got away from it after I graduated. And a couple months ago, I came back to my hometown and Urban hit me up and kind of was like, well, would you be interested in starting a podcast? I was like, well, that's easier than writing right now because I was doing that so much. I just wanted to give myself a break. So we just sat around one night and just started hashing out the details. And I mean, it's still a work in progress with everything, but we kind of just started up on a whim. And I think we're on episode 8. We just recorded 2 nights ago. We're out on every almost major platform you can listen to your podcast on. So that's my story. Urban can talk a little bit about his background, but
yeah, I just used to play football in high school and love the game, every level of it really, and follow it like it's a religion almost. But I've never been a part of like sports writing or none of that. Me and Nick have been friends for years, and we just wanted to start talking about sports and help him get back into the writing aspect of it maybe down the line, but just give him that launching pad possibly just to get started talking about the game again.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, why did you guys settle on the name Heavyweights Podcast? Where does that come from?
I came up with it driving one day, actually, but we're both pretty big human beings.
Yeah, we both played
offensive line.
Yeah.
And it came to my head when he was saying he wanted to start covering sports. And I was like, hey man, let's make a podcast. I was like, what do you think about the heavyweights? Yeah. He said, I like that. And then it just went from there.
Yeah. Cause our intro talked about, I'm 6'6", about 290 pounds. Urban's a little shorter at like 6'3", 6'2". So it kind of fit and clicked right there.
Jeez, do I feel tiny.
We're giant humans. Wow. I'm only 6'1". For sure. Yeah, no, it definitely is though. You know, kind of what you were saying, it definitely is a process and a learning process at that. I mean, I was talking, Derek and I have talked before and just like, man, the progress that we have made is in terms of, content and also just like sound quality and just things you don't really think about. It's crazy, but you just got to kind of learn a lot of that stuff on the fly. You don't really, from coming from me, and I don't think you did, Derek, either. We didn't come from, a background and didn't get a degree in that. And so a lot of it is like, if you go back to like my first episode, I tell people, please don't, because it's really not good at anything. But yeah, it's a continuous process, continuous grind. And, as you continue to do it, man, it definitely gets, I feel it gets easier as you get more natural and you kind of, build off of each other's chemistry and stuff. I can tell you, Derek, from our first podcast and now, I think it's definitely a lot more fluid than it was.
And our subscribers are saying the exact same thing too. They're saying content's got much better. So
yeah, if you ask Dustin, our episodes are good, but from the first one to even now, I still tell him it sounds like garbage because I've showed him yours. That's how we found you guys on Twitter. And it's just like the level to get even there is like we've got a long way to go. And I think I'm too much of a critic on my own self, which I'm assuming you guys are the same way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's always good to be a critic of yourself. It's always the most important thing to be your biggest critic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, because it forces you to continue to improve and continue to want to bring out unique content, which I think is really important and huge. And something, we've wanted to do is kind of reach out to fellow podcasters and really, build connections and do, joint podcasts like we're doing right now and really just connect each other. It's, I feel like a lot of people kind of down talk social media, but man, it has been such wonders. I mean, it's how we found you guys, obviously, Derek, that's how you and I connected. It's just,
right.
It's Twitter is just an amazing tool. If you use it right and you use it for the right things. And so you guys on here really, for that. And so, so I thought, we could, in this podcast, we could move on now to free agency and kind of talk about that. Obviously, free agency starting this next Wednesday, and legal tampering, I believe we said it starts on Monday. So really, it's like free agency starts on Monday. You can talk to players and teams can communicate then. And so next was going to be absolutely wild. And so, we thought that we could kind of talk with you guys a little bit and kind of get your thoughts a little bit about some of the Colts' potential needs. Derek and I have already talked about this a lot on our podcast. We want to kind of get your guys' takes on it. And I don't know if you saw, but in our last podcast, we had talked about our top 5 positions of need for the Colts going into 2020 here. We made lists on and posted it on social media, and then we kind of defended our top 5. I don't want to have to force you guys to do that on the spot, but I'm curious your top 3 positions of need that you have for the Colts right now. So Derek and I kind of went 1 and 2. We kind of were similar there, but I'm curious what your guys' would be.
See, mine would be a little different. Just position needs. I think one, you still have to go start with quarterback no matter what. Mm-hmm. I don't think Jacoby's the answer by any means. He's serviceable, but serviceable at what degree? Like, are you okay with being 6 to 9 wins a year?
Right.
You need to take that next step. I don't know if drafting a quarterback at 13 is the right spot for that. And number 2, it'd almost be a tie for second for me because it'd either be an interior edge rusher, a nice 3 technique D tackle right there, or a wide receiver. That's would be my top 3. But I would almost tie both of those right together. Mm-hmm. But above all, it's quarterback, getting that right.
See, I'm the other way. I think you can roll with Jacoby because I've told him a few times there are far worse quarterbacks that have won the Super Bowl. So, but edge rusher to me is our main concern. Then you look in the interior, defensive tackle, nose guard, 3 technique.
Man.
Wide receiver as well. I mean, we need a second guy for T.Y. Hilton. Somebody because they're going to double team T.Y. no matter what.
Yeah. But because Cody and I mentioned this the other day. He and I both agreed at number 3 was wide receiver. Right? We both agreed that that's a top 3 need. But we both didn't think it's a super pressing issue. We just need our guys to actually get healthy. Then they can keep producing. But he went quarterback number 1 and then defensive tackle number 2. That's what the majority of Colts Twitter and Facebook and Colts media in general believe. Or you could switch the wide receiver, defensive tackle. There's a lot of people that view that. I said I wanted defensive tackle first rather than a quarterback because I felt that there were multiple different options on the table for the Colts through the draft and through this offseason that they could do to improve at that position. I didn't think with the defensive ends wanting the money they're wanting right now in free agency and some of the guys who are getting franchise tagged now, I don't see us getting a big 3-tech guy in free agency at the moment. And when you see guys like Javon Kinlaw and Derek Brown in this draft that are mammoths on the inside and seeing what they do, Kinlaw to me is the perfect Chris Ballard guy to pick in this draft. And that's why I just think that would be so awesome for me at 13 to see us go with him because of just the way he plays. So that's why I was saying defensive tackle first.
No, I agree with defensive tackle. I think our first mock drafts we did a few weeks ago, I had Kinlaw going to the Colts.
I had Derek Brown, but
he is a double team shredding machine, and I think he is the perfect fit up front of what Ballard preaches, building in the trenches. And if they don't go that route, I mean, you've got guys in the top of the second round that are going to be there, like Ross Blackman from TCU, who I really loved on film. But I still think D tackle, because I don't know what's going to be there at 13. You can figure out in free agency the quarterbacks you need, but you could get a solid defensive tackle. I mean, Brown's probably going to be gone, but you've got Kinlaw there, and I would love that pick. I would probably be happier than most people with that pick at 13.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the belief that I just look at the Super Bowl. I mean, let's be real. I don't think the Chiefs, besides Patrick Mahomes and maybe a few of their skill players, I mean, they're not. I mean, Patrick Mahomes was really the main reason, obviously, why they won that Super Bowl. And I just kind of look at, you win, you kind of, I guess, live and die by how good or bad your quarterback play is. I mean, the 49ers, they're fantastic all over, but I kind of always go back to, this is kind of why I keep going back to the quarterback. You live and die by how good or bad your quarterback is. If you have a quarterback that can be okay, and, if you have a great team around him, then you can do what the 49ers did. But I don't know. I'm just kind of the belief that you live and die with the quarterback. And also, with that caveat of, I think you definitely go after Ross Blacklock, who I love from TCU in the second round. And that's a guy that I would get. And then you can cross off two things and you get, a very talented quarterback and then also a very talented defensive tackle. But I definitely agree that I think it's a major, major need. 3 technique is, obviously I put it at number 2. So I think it's one of the most important things, definitely the most important defensive piece to get. But that's just kind of my defense of why I said it. I mean, but I would totally be okay if the Colts went and took Javon Kinlaw at 13, because that guy's a game wrecker, man. He's insane. So,
well, my thing is with the quarterback situation, I don't feel like they can get a whole lot better with the guys that are in free agency. Maybe you take a flyer on Tom Brady and have him for 1 year.
That's not going to happen.
But he's not coming to Indy. And then I don't like Phillip Rivers personally. He turns the ball over way too much for my liking. You got Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's a little bit better than Jacoby Brissett, but he's not blowing the top off of anybody. He's not out there throwing 40 touchdowns a year. He's not a big game changer. So my thing is, do you go get Jameis Winston? But he throws more picks than anybody I've ever seen. So
there were people wondering about his eyesight. Like, obviously he had that surgery over the off season. They're wondering how that's gonna affect his his being able to see receivers. I mean, honestly, he's had that issue throughout all of college too, having the squinting of the eyes. I mean, it could quite possibly help him read defenses a lot better. And, Bruce Arians' system, it is complex and it's a very gunslinging kind of offense, kind of what, Frank Reich wants to do. I kind of agree that, like, for the money that he's probably going to ask for, and on top of, he's going from a former Colts OC head coaching role to another head coach at the Indianapolis Colts. I just don't think that much is going to change in that regard.
Right. And also,
I always kind of wonder what Jameis Winston does. If he, well, when he had the bad eyesight, is he just kind of like, oh, that kind of looks like a red jersey. I'm just gonna chuck it up and see what happens. I mean, that might honestly be what happened because
Yeah, and I think Bruce made that worse. I mean, we know his time here in Indy, both stints, and then in Pittsburgh, he's you're going to do a 3 to 5 step drop, and if you think that player is going to be open, you just let it ride, and that just maximized the worst aspect of Winston's game this past year because you always see moments where, holy crap, this guy can be elite. He can put it in tight windows, and then he turns around and throws 3 picks in the next 3 drives. So it just it was unreal.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely is crazy to think that you could throw 30 interceptions in one season. I don't know how he did it, but
I don't know.
Okay, so I thought that we could, kind of look at now kind of your, some of your players who are on your free agency wish list. Derek and I have kind of talked about on our podcast some of the players. Obviously, some players have gotten re-signed. I think Chris Jones is one of the guys that we had early on.
Right.
If this guy hits the open market, the Colts better go after him. But obviously, Kansas City bringing him back, he's off the market now. Who are your guys', if you had to choose one guy that you'd want the Colts to sign in free agency, who would that be? Who's on your dream wish list for the Colts here in free agency?
I would go with Eric Armstead.
Yes.
Him. If I'm just going defensive tackle there, which I think is their biggest need besides edge rusher, he would fit the team very well. You can move him around. He showed he can move around, kind of like a Justin Tuckish kind of guy, but he's a game changer when he's with other. I see the biggest thing I have with him is when he's not with all those number 1 overall draft picks, does he fall back to the pack and become like a regular defensive tackle, or does he rise up and demand a double team? And I don't know.
Do you see him at like the 3 technique potentially fitting right in there?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, he can move around, so
yeah, almost like to a better degree, kind of a Tyquan Lewis type player. He can play end, he can play tackle, he can play whatever you need. But at this point in his career, he's obviously better than Tyquan Lewis. So right. I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, the only thing that scares me with Armstead, though, is he was solid his first few years, and then last year he had a better year where the sack numbers went up and he produced more because that defensive line in San Francisco is unreal. But I like it. Just the money would worry me a little bit just because you're basically paying off of one huge year, and he's still at least an average player. But if I had to pick just one player, I don't want to pay top money to like Jadeveon Clowney or Ngakoue. They're going to command way too much. I'd look at someone like Matthew Judon out of Baltimore, who Baltimore's not going to re-sign him. He can come in, he can play a couple different spots, he can stand up and down the line. He's going to get you that pass rush. We have Justin Houston, but I mean, you don't know how much more you're going to get out of maybe another year, another 2 years. I know we've invested so much in this D line, but if I picked one person that I could sign for a decent contract for 3 to 4 years, it'd be Judon.
Yeah, I like that. I guess I didn't hear that news that Baltimore was going to re-sign him. He's definitely a guy that I would love. Derek, do you have a guy that you right now, as it stands, that you would want the Colts to potentially pursue? I don't know if we've talked about our updated kind of wish list here.
I don't know if we actually updated it, but yeah, I mean, when Chris Jones' name first hit that market, I mean, I was like, please, because I mean, in the Super Bowl, I don't think people quite realize that man had 3 deflected passes up in front in that Super Bowl. I mean, we never really talked much about, the defense of the Kansas City Chiefs over the last few years, but Chris Jones definitely has shown up and he's been one of the marquee defensive tackles. It's unfortunate that they're going to franchise tag him and keep him around. But I think right now, just with the names that I'm seeing, if the price is not as big as some people are saying it is, I would like to go with Byron Jones from the Dallas Cowboys. I think that when you look at Byron, he's just the exact same thing as a Malik Hooker, a guy whose stats really don't pop off at you. It's just with the way they play, their stats are deflated just simply because people don't throw in their direction. They don't throw in their direction because they know that these guys can make a play on the ball from anywhere on the field. And that's just the kind of guy that, it could be that other safety position, because we just don't know with the future of Kahari Willis. Obviously, Kahari Willis we want to keep around, and he did play pretty well given the fact that he was a rookie. We obviously want to keep him around and try to keep going with that. But obviously with the secondary, we want to continue to try and build that up as well. And I just think Byron Jones would be a great complement to that back end, just as long as the price is there.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the price will be there, but I love that. I know that I saw something on Twitter the other day that Ballard's draft tendencies with corners, he wants at least, I think, 33 inches on the arm length, which fits. And the only corner I think that measured out this year was Christian Fulton and Okudah. So you're not going to Okudah. We know that. Fulton's too early to take at 13. He might sneak in late round 1.
Yeah.
The price is there. Byron Jones is one of the least targeted corners in the league, and that would just lock down another spot. I love that as long as he's not commanding 13 or 14 million a year.
Yep.
Right, and that's the key. How much is he going to demand? It sounds like he's going to want that kind of money.
Because the media is already saying that. I don't even know if he's actually worth that, but there's media now saying, oh, $18-19 million a year is what's coming for the direction of Byron Jones. I've not heard him say anything. Y'all are just putting numbers in this kid's mouth. And now he's going to demand that because the media is saying that's exactly what he's deserved. It's the same thing with Dak Prescott.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think another guy that I'm going to kind of talk about if he does hit the open market, another Dallas Cowboy, I would love Amari Cooper. He's a guy that, when you look at this free agent wide receiver class, it doesn't pop off at all. But there's really no other names except for Amari Cooper that I'd be really interested in the Colts bringing in. But I look at it because, if I look at the Colts offense, I would say right now, you could argue tight end potentially, but I would say arguably the biggest position of need on that offense outside of quarterback would probably be wide receiver.
Yeah.
And I think that if you can get a guy like Cooper, you can't, as much as you want to, you can't you can't address all the holes and fix all the holes in the draft in the first couple rounds. Either you got to go quarterback, defensive tackle, which you talked about. You also got to get a tight end potentially. And Derek, I know you've wanted a right guard, so maybe you address it at some point there. But my kind of thoughts are if you get a guy like Cooper and then you go and draft a guy, it allows you to fill some other needs. And also, if you want to draft a receiver, drafting him a little bit later on in the draft instead of, spending another second round pick on a wide receiver in consecutive drafts. And so he's a guy that I would definitely be interested in if Dallas, just can't afford all these guys. If they bring back, they signed Dak Prescott and, maybe they bring back Byron Jones. I don't know how much money they have, but they're going to be cap strapped pretty much. So I don't feel like they can bring back all these guys. And so if they, for some reason, allow Amari Cooper to walk, man, I'm all for it. I think that he is just a tremendous player. I would just be excited if he hit.
And here's the thing before I let you guys go. So with Amari Cooper, did anyone else see the video on Twitter from 106.7 The Fan on NBC Sports? Some guy they were talking about Trent Williams, what the Redskins should do to move him. And one of the guys mentioned what the Redskins should do is bring Amari Cooper into the mix to, help whatever quarterback they decide to go with for future reference. And there's one guy that was like, trying to discredit Amari Cooper, saying like, isn't he old? It's like, no, that he's 26. Oh, well, isn't he slow? No, he ran a 4.42 at the combine when he came in. It's like, this man was like striking out on Amari Cooper. He's like just checking every box for him already on like, he's fast, he's young, he's good at playing the position. Amari Cooper is a great player. I would definitely be ecstatic to have him, especially since, like you said, Cody, he's young and you could afford to give him that kind of contract if you decided that you wanted to go through with it, because he's a low risk kind of guy when it comes to that.
Yeah, I'd echo all that as well. Him as a number 2 to T.Y. Hilton, that would be one of the most dangerous 1 and 2 wide receiver combinations in the NFL. I mean, it'd be right up there with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin from Tampa Bay for me.
My question is, I mean, both of you, Derek and Cody, how much would you be willing to pay him, though? Because he's going to, I don't know if it's been reported, but I thought I've seen some stuff about how he wants to be a top 5 paid wideout in the league.
No.
No.
I
think if that's the case, probably not.
That's what's turned me completely off. I thought that's what I saw that he was reporting last season when they were trying to talk with him and Dak. Because I think Byron Jones is going to be the guy left out. They're going to bring back Cooper and Dak. I think they're going to overpay both of them. But to me, I'm going to pay him as a number 2, a fringe number 1, but I'm not trying to commit 60 to 70 million to him.
Yeah, I mean, because, me personally, if I'm the Colts right now, I'd obviously pay him as my number 1 because, I mean, T.Y. Hilton, he's 31, 32 years old. T.Y. is on the back end of his career. Even though T.Y. is still productive, T.Y. is still dealing with injuries every year. He's only got a couple more years until he does start slipping because, once that speed starts to deteriorate, then, T.Y. being a small receiver doesn't necessarily help him. And Amari being young and just checking every box. I'd be fine with saying, hey, Amari, we want to give you a 4-year deal and I'm willing to give him, I'm going to say, I know that Michael Thomas right now is getting a 5-year, $100 million. I would say, around the 4 years, 75 to 80 million. I'm down to give him that because, he is a pretty much a top 10 wide receiver. You put him in a good system, a good offensive system that can use him better and just get the quarterback there. I think he's a great wide out, and I think he's a potential top 10 wide receiver. But in regards to like top end money, nah, I'm not giving that up for him because I just don't think his talent doesn't match his production. I'm willing to give top 5 money to superior talent. His production matches that, but he doesn't make that system better. He just is the wide receiver that's there. That's the true number 1, and he just fits into the system though.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind him being here. The only thing that would have concerned me if you would have asked me last year, the year before, was his drop rate. I know that last year when he got to when he left Oakland, it was at almost 10% of his passes targeted towards him. He was dropping. I know this year though, it was his lowest year, I believe, since his rookie year. So he's improved in that aspect. It's just I'm not going to be blown away by like, oh, we have Amari Cooper. That's our only option. I know T.Y. Hilton gets hurt, but I wouldn't mind it. It's just like for me, it's the money aspect. How much is he going to want? But I think you can, if you have him next year, you can get a receiver in the 3rd or 4th round, and you can pair that up. T.Y. is getting older, like we said, and he's been hurt and banged up. But that's still a good problem to have because if T.Y. doesn't pan out this year, Cooper is your number 1 option. Still a great option to have.
Yeah, well, regardless of what the Colts do, I think it's fairly obvious whether it be Paris Campbell, whether it be another guy on the roster, the Colts need to find a number 2 receiver. Like I think that's clear and obvious. They need to find a guy to complement T.Y. Hilton. They have not done that since T.Y. Hilton was drafted. He has not really had a number 2 receiver to take the pressure off of him. So doing that would do absolute wonders, I think, for this Colts offense if they had a consistent number 2 wide receiver. And if Cooper, if the price is right, man, I'm totally down for it. But like you said, Derek, man, if he's asking for top 5 wide receiver money, no, thank you.
Yeah, no.
But so kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about tonight. Obviously, the Colts right now, as it stands, are sitting there at 13 overall. And I'm curious, who are some guys that potentially pique your interest? We kind of touched on this a little bit, but who are some guys that potentially pique your interest there at number 13 that you would like to see the Colts target and potentially draft? There's a lot of names out there, so kind of curious some of the guys that would pique your guys' interest.
All right, for me, I mean, I think Javon Kinlaw would be my biggest one. I like sitting there dropping down. I'm not sold. I like Jordan Love. I'm not sold on Herbert, but I just think taking either one of those at 13 is too much of a risk for me. You've got needs. Kinlaw's there. If Derek Brown drops, I'm all over that too. But I still think we need some help in the secondary too. And I know that I didn't say that as my number 3 need, but CJ Henderson, the way he performed at the combine, I went back and watched his tape. He's a physical lockdown corner that I think makes plays. I know he only had, I think, one interception last year, but his passes batted down were at 11 or 12 for Florida. Those would be my two biggest ones would be Kinlaw and CJ Henderson. Obviously, you're going to have a reach for all these offensive linemen going quick. So it's going to allow some other players to drop. I mean, I wish Isaiah Simmons could drop too, just because we know Ballard takes based off of his big board, even if that's not a position of need. So I tend to not look at like just needs for us either, but where Ballard would be on his big board. And I think for me, it's going to be Kinlaw right there. And then Henderson might still be an option, which I know might surprise both of you, but I like the Henderson pick too.
I like Kinlaw as well, but I'm really interested to see how the top three wide receivers play out in the draft, like CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, and Henry Ruggs. Where do they fall? And where does that leave the Colts when they go? So if there's a Jerry Jeudy on the board or there's a CeeDee Lamb on the board, it'd be hard for me not to take either one of them, really. I mean,
yeah, it's an interesting one.
Now, if they go out and sign on Amari Cooper, obviously they're going in a different direction. But see, if that doesn't work out, if one of those top three, even Henry Ruggs, got somebody that can take the top off of any defense in this league, you get one of those guys to go along with T.Y. Hilton, and the offense will open up tremendously, I think.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. So you said all your stuff is on, all the major things, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all that stuff. People can find you on there.